Roman Reigns had forced Jey Uso to acknowledge him, cementing himself as the tribal chief and the head of the table. But acknowledgement alone wasn't enough. Roman wanted complete loyalty, total obedience, and absolute control over WWE. And anyone who dared resist, from Kevin Owens to Daniel Bryan, from Edge to Cesaro, would be broken down piece by piece. This was no longer just about family. This was about power, dominance, and building a dynasty that no one could touch. And as Roman tightened his grip on the Universal Championship, the Bloodline story entered its next chapter. One where every challenger, every betrayal, and every victory would shape the legacy of the tribal chief. After all the fighting, Jey would finally fall in line. He would acknowledge Roman as his tribal chief. Jey would do anything in his power to impress the tribal chief, winning main events, beating up Roman's opponents, but no matter what he did, it never seemed to be enough for Roman. It seemed like Jey would have to give up his life for the tribal chief to be finally happy with him. One of the best examples of this would come at Survivor Series. At the show, Jey would be on Team SmackDown that would face off against Team Raw, and Team SmackDown would actually lose, with Jey being eliminated pretty quickly. After this disappointment, Roman would order Jey not to accompany him in his match against WWE champion Drew McIntyre, but Jey wouldn't listen. He would come out to the ring and would actually allow Roman to win the match, creating an opening. But it didn't matter that Jey helped. He didn't obey. He didn't fall in line. He didn't listen to the tribal chief's orders. So Roman was pissed, openly berating him in the following weeks, and even when Jey needed help out there in the ring, the tribal chief wouldn't leave the comfort of his locker room to help him. He would even beat up on him when Jey accepted a tag team match on behalf of the tribal chief. I mean, who is he to talk for the tribal chief? Now, if you're enjoying this video so far, would you please consider leaving a like, maybe even a comment? And also, if you are really enjoying this, we are already working on part 3 of this saga, which would cover the beginning of the 2 belts Roman era and also the beginning of the Sami Zayn saga. So if you are interested in that, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Thank you. So Roman would no-show the main event, leaving Jey to fight a handicap match in which Jey held his own and was even looking like he was about to win it until Roman Reigns came to the ring. Roman would choke out Kevin Owens and would even beat up Jey mercilessly. Kevin Owens will also be the first challenger Roman would face for the title after becoming the tribal chief, and Reigns would destroy him at TLC with some Jey Uso interference. They would even have a rematch on SmackDown in a steel cage where Jey Uso would handcuff Kevin to the ropes, allowing the tribal chief to leave the cage easily. However, this isn't where his feud against Kevin would end, as they would have a last man standing match at the Royal Rumble, where Roman would once again be victorious. On the same show, it would be Edge winning the Royal Rumble, who would be waiting until after the Elimination Chamber to make his choice on the opponent he will main event WrestleMania against. Why until after Elimination Chamber, you might ask? Because at Elimination Chamber, Roman will defend his title against the winner of the Elimination Chamber match right after they are finished winning it. And the man to win the match was Daniel Bryan, but after being so exhausted, he could not stand up to Roman, who would end up demolishing him. But all of this was cowardly, at least according to Daniel Bryan. Roman just kept on pulling strings to make sure he won, not caring about honor. So Daniel Bryan would have to defeat Jey Uso if he wanted to get his title shot at Fastlane. And defeat Jey he did. Jey yet again had proved why he wasn't worthy of being the head of the table. At Fastlane, the special enforcer for the match would be none other than Edge, who wouldn't see Roman tapping out and would also attack Daniel Bryan, allowing Roman to win the match once again. This would set up our WrestleMania main event, a triple threat between Roman, Daniel Bryan, and Edge. And this match would be the first true showing of the dominance of Roman Reigns. This was no longer about family, this was about pure dominance over the division. And there is no better showing for this dominance than this picture. Roman would stack Edge and Daniel Bryan on top of each other and pin them both, just to show there are no ifs, buts, or maybes. He is the most feared and dominant man in the company. In the next few weeks, he will face Bryan again on SmackDown, and after a great match, he would banish him from WWE, as at this point, Bryan would change companies and move over to AEW. But hey, check the calendar. It's been a while since we had some good old family drama, so it might be time for us to get back to that with the return from injury by Jey's twin brother, Jimmy Uso. And Jimmy would seemingly join them, but not quite. He would wear Usos merch, he wouldn't listen to Roman, he would act on his own accord. His actions would even make Jey question his loyalty to the tribal chief, and this would start pissing Roman off. In one memorable moment after the Usos lost their match to the Mysterios, Roman would even call Jey Jimmy. And once Jey said that he is Jey, not Jimmy, Roman would reply with, "Does it matter anyway?" The water was soon approaching boiling point, as next week Jey would ask Jimmy why is he doing this to him. Can't he see that he has to respect the tribal chief? Roman would double down, questioning Jimmy's love for Jey since he is putting him through hell, stretching him this thin. Jey would come between the two and yell at them both to stop this nonsense and would storm out. However, he would come back in 2 weeks, and then the three of them would finally join in embrace as we would get the full formation of the Bloodline. This one was way more anticlimactic than Jey, which felt kind of weird. They did so much with the Jey story, and this one had even more potential in my opinion, with Jey being stuck in the middle. But moving on, the Usos would start off their record-breaking tag team title run at Money in the Bank, capturing the SmackDown tag team titles from the Mysterios, and Roman would retain his title over Edge. He would cut a promo after the match, talking about how now the whole world has to acknowledge him, before John Cena would make his entrance to one of the biggest pops in a while. However, just as things seemed to be heating up again, the Bloodline story kind of came to a full stop. His feud with Cena would be okay, but nothing to brag about, culminating in an okay match at SummerSlam where Roman would once again retain. But we would get another pretty big return that very night. One of the most terrifying wrestlers in the world, and the previous partner of the wise man Paul Heyman, Brock Lesnar. However, even this wouldn't go anywhere, as there would be some talk about who is Paul really aligned with, but it would never get a real resolution. Guess even great stories like these have their teenage years. During this feud, we would also get probably the single most infamous match of this reign. Roman Reigns would fight against the Demon. Finn Balor would at one point start pulsating on the ground. The lights would turn red and his music would start playing. This would give him power. He would beat up on Roman and he would climb the top turnbuckle, and then the turnbuckle would break down, the music would stop, and the lights would return to normal. Somehow all of these are connected. This would allow Roman to retain the title, and the in-canon explanation for all this would be that it was God himself who interfered to help Roman win, because God just likes Roman so much. Yes, that was their legitimate explanation. But yeah, let's go back to the Brock and Roman saga, which would just be a bunch of who is Paul Heyman really aligned with segments. And in their match, Roman would win with help from Paul Heyman. The reason I say help like that is because Paul would actually throw the title perfectly in between Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, prompting the question, who was Paul really aligned with? Again, Brock would get suspended for a little bit after beating up too many people, and Roman would smack the roster around a little bit. He would even have a quote-unquote match against Sami Zayn, who was beaten up by Brock going into the match, which is pretty interesting looking back for those who know what happens afterwards. For those of you that don't, stay tuned. But yeah, Brock is back, and Roman would fire Paul Heyman due to doubts about his loyalty. Paul would be really messed up during his time away from the tribal chief, as he was, according to him, nothing without Roman by his side. But that didn't last for long, as Paul would align himself with Brock pretty soon for a little bit, before later going on back to the tribal chief. This whole storyline with Paul Heyman was executed so messily here, it's actually kind of wild. But before he fights Brock one more time, Roman would have a feud against the man who turned his life upside down with a single chair shot, his ex-teammate from the Shield, Seth Rollins. And Seth would play with him. He would mention their past in his promos, which visibly messed with Roman. He would make sure to have no interferences during their match by messing with Roman's mind enough to make him go blind with rage. He would even make his entrance into their match the same way they did together all those years ago, through the crowds in Black Shield gear. And Roman would actually lose the match, but by DQ, meaning he didn't lose the title, after losing his mind to rage and choking out Seth after not breaking the submission for 5 seconds of Seth holding the ropes. However, this storyline would be put on hold after yet another Brock Lesnar return, as he would win the Royal Rumble and choose Roman as his opponent for WrestleMania. He would even win the WWE Championship during this time. He was really built up as this monster that no one could defeat. No one apart from the Tribal Chief, as he would finally, once and for all, defeat him in the main event of WrestleMania and would from this point on hold both world championships in his hands. There was no stopping him now, and the Bloodline would just keep on getting stronger from here on out.